Hey, welcome everyone to 2024. This is our inaugural RadialSpark Radio first broadcast of the year. We got a couple of things to cover today in the news, along with a fun little article to talk about that ties into everything that I'm sure everyone who's watching this podcast has paid attention to last year. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And hopefully we've given everyone enough time to get over their hangovers from 2023, whether that be actual alcoholically induced hangovers or just putting that year behind you. So welcome everyone.
Throbbing headache.
Yeah. So welcome everyone. With me today, I've got Justin Ludlow, as you know, my partner in crime, so to speak. It's a man, he likes to say behind the curtain, but of course he's in front of it with that hideous hat.
Yeah. Well,
and
the hat is less hideous than the head, so I gotta have the hat.
Well, we actually have Peyton, who is behind the curtain, running the stream. So there he is, helping us out here, trying to keep us on target, on track, and on time, which is absolutely impossible. And my camera is not focusing anymore. So technical difficulties starting off with 2024 straight away. Well, with that, we're just going to dive into the news today. And we've got an interesting podcast. Should be about an hour. We're going to have this segmented up on YouTube, different chapters, so you guys can digest it. Peyton will be distributing it through Twitter, X, whatever, LinkedIn, all the social medias channels. So guys, stay tuned for that. So yeah, first news of today, Heroku is actually adding some new features, which is really exciting. Heroku's been, ever since like COVID, it's been kind of slow on the new features, new changes, but we've been working and talking with Bob Wise over at Heroku, who's the new CEO and running that. Great guy, and really enjoying the vision he has with it with the rest of his team. And they're really revitalizing the product itself. And one of the big things they're doing here is Heroku's introducing basic dynos, which is a cost-effective way to do app testing, iteration, prototyping, things like that. So for those of you who remember way back when, Heroku had a free tier. Unfortunately, that's gotten retired. So, we're not going to have free $0 dynos. That being said, these basic dynos are extremely inexpensive, like pennies on the dollar. And it's again, I'm looking forward to incorporating this to some of our again, like our prototyping and just proof of concept type work when we're looking to show some capabilities of how Heroku works and is able to be deployed and how easy it is without having to spool up a standard dyno, which, to be fair, like standard dynos were never that expensive anyway, but it's just nice to have this option where if you're not doing any volumetric testing on large compute, large number of users or data processing, you're just like, hey, I need to branch this off. I want to test this little feature, see if this little applet ties into your website, your mobile app, a small service that you're playing around with, or if you're just if you're on the Salesforce side, you're a solutions engineer, or you're working with another partner like us, and they're like, hey, can you guys demo, how would Heroku community work? Show us something. Like partners like us could scale some of these up really quickly in our existing contracts without having to blow the budget, or getting a bunch of larger dynos to do something super basic that's going to be potentially throwaway or just test work for those of you in the Salesforce world, like dev sandbox type stuff. So this is really cool. I'm excited to see this get rolled out and other features like this. From my understanding, just based on reading the article and my knowledge of what Heroku is, they're going to continue to add functionality like this for us developers here, which is fantastic, just giving us more flexibility moving forward. Justin, I know I was just doing the run through here, but do you have any thoughts on this new change?
Yeah, I do. So one of the things I like about this, I'm gonna hit a few key points here. So one, with the disappearance of like free tier Heroku plans and being able to get in, obviously there's now a bit of a barrier of entry to get on the platform. And what I like to see about these kinds of additions is that, Salesforce isn't just focused on like their enterprise tier customers and like what's the biggest size, largest infrastructure package we can sell. They're figuring out how can we have these small incremental infrastructure pieces to roll out, which is cool because, prior to this basic dyno, They have the Eco Dyno type, which is only available through their credit card model. And it does have things like going to sleep after enough idle time, things like that, to have that low barrier to entry for, a private individual or like a very early stage startup to experiment with a concept. But the second you get into Heroku Enterprise, and for those of you in the Salesforce ecosystem, you know that that's moving from the pay monthly credit card model to actually getting on a contract with Heroku. Eco dynos aren't available. You can't provision them in there. So that idea of a super lightweight piece of infrastructure that you're really using to smell check something like that, it wasn't available there. So basic dynos are available. So you're now getting kind of like that counterpart to an Eco dyno, but it's still dedicated to you. The way the math works out, for those of you that know Heroku, where a standard dyno uses 1 dyno unit, a basic uses 0.28, which is a silly number, but basically a quarter. So when you do just need to test like a technical implementation of something without scale, this means that developers can procure a very small chunk of infrastructure just to check that like all the switches flip the way you want them to, and then they can tear it back down. So this is hugely advantageous for setting up like temporary cloud-based testing environments, development environments. I think it's a big win.
Yeah, an engineer was behind setting that up when they went with 0.28, because someone said, why is it not just a quarter? It's like, well, it's got to be 0.28 because the infrastructure costs the reason, and really you can't do this. And AWS behind, like, I'm sure there was a long explanation of why it can't be a quarter. But that's just going to drive everyone nuts. But let's just say effectively a quarter. Round down.
But
close enough for government work.
Yeah, you can. Well, and when you think about comparing this to like a private space, right? Like a private space, small dyno is 5 units. Yeah. So you're getting a lot of basic dynos to just.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's still pennies on the dollar. So to be able to spool a couple of these up to build up your like you said, that piece of infrastructure and run it this way. I'm glad they're doing stuff like this, because again, it's just one of those examples when, if you're like developing your apps on AWS by yourself, sans a platform like Heroku, like you have to plan this out. It's like, oh, where's my dev space going to be? How's this going to work? You got to set up all your virtual environments to segment all your infrastructure to segment like that. Doing whether it's just traditional Docker deployment or a Kubernetes, however you're going to do that. And it's just, again, like I've done some virtual machine management by myself, just using Proxmox and a CPU or PC for some fun at-home projects. And again, it's like, oh crap, I have this much hardware, here's what I need to do. And this makes it so much easier to be like, oh yeah, I'll use it 0.28, not a quarter, but 0.28. Compute, but you get a full virtual machine to do this like effectively. So it's like, it's really nice that they're able to automate this. It's just one of those nice things that, again, this is why you do that, because for all the business people that are going to listen to this, all the Salesforce aides going to listen to this, and I just said VM, RAM, like they're just glossed over. It's just nice to be like, I don't have to worry about any of that. I just want the cheap thing, and this will run a test, and I'll know if my idea works, if my testing works or whatnot, and I don't have to spend a full $1 on this. I spend 0.28 of $1.
Exactly. Well, because what was that meme you shared with me a couple weeks ago, right? Everybody has a test environment. Some people are lucky enough to have a separate environment for production.
Yeah, exactly.
So what this really means is you can afford to have a test environment. And I'm hoping it's going to drive more use of the Heroku review app functionality in their pipelines. Like, It's like, oh, I have a pull request, spin up a version of the app for that pull request and actually test it. Because I feel like that's an underused feature because of the cost of the dynos, the add-ons, like actually replicating that environment. So having small scale add-ons and dynos that you can provision as your stand-in for the smell check, I think that's huge. It's brilliant.
Yep. Well, so moving on with the news.
I was going to say, stop me. I'll keep going.
Yeah. So moving on with the news. So Salesforce more recently has started to discuss how their investment in white hat hacking, for those of you guys who don't know what white hat hacking is, it's just like the old cowboy era where the white hats were the good guys, the black hats were the bad guys. If you guys ever watched spaghetti westerns or fans of that, Clint Eastwood, he was always kind of like the anti-hero, never quite always wore the white hat. but generally it's good. But again, like the old traditional westerns, there's white hat versus black hat. So white hat hackers are good guys, and what they do is they go out and they chase down bounties in order to find vulnerabilities within particular, you know, companies and their infrastructure. So the interesting thing is that so Salesforce had an article recently where they've spent about $18.9 million in white hat hacking over the course since 2015, I think it said.
Yeah.
And this is something interesting because like being in the Salesforce ecosystem, and again, one of the benefits of being in Salesforce, and to a certain extent Heroku, is that for the most part we haven't really had to worry about or think about like that the security side of the
Yeah.
Salesforce platform because you've offloaded that. So as a Salesforce developer, as a Salesforce admin, or as a anyone who's in charge of director, CTO, CIO, whose major footprint of their company is effectively that CRM, and they've offloaded all that responsibility to the cloud. As part of that, you haven't really had to think about you know, tightening down your own security on your system because your Salesforce is doing it. So it's interesting to see that this is actually happening at this, like these larger companies, that they're pursuing projects like this, and they're taking this kind of stuff seriously now that I would argue Salesforce is quite a bit more ubiquitous than it was even back in 2015. Like if you have a CRM, it's probably Sales Cloud. It's probably you have customer service. It's if you're a mid-sized business, you either have Service Cloud or you're looking at migrating over to it. Like it's the number one CRM at this point. Or in 2015 it might have been, but it's still like there was like a Zoho and a lot of other people playing around the fringe. So this is cool. So I know that they said in the article, Justin, you went through this in detail and have some opinions on it. I know they said that, you know, Salesforce is one of the most was among the first enterprise companies to launch the bug bounty program.
Yes.
Which to me, like, and I hate to call them out on the carpet, but I feel it's a little bit disingenuous. Like I know it's about 10 years ago, but I feel like Apple and Google have been doing bug bounty programs for a while. Maybe I'm wrong. You know, maybe it's
Well, so I think they might be gliding by on a technicality because I think some of it comes from the fact of like how public they made the program and how formal they structured it. Like
that's fair.
Because I'll be honest, I was actually going to explain like the difference between a white hat hacker and a black hat hacker. Like the way I would explain it to somebody is like they both do the scary thing. They breach your system, but the white hat hacker tells you how they did so you can patch it. Like
Right.
that's what they're getting into. And so I think there's a long history in technology of even outside of like formal white hat hacking programs, there are white hat hackers out there that will just go out and engage with the company either on an independent contract with them, not as part of like a formal program, or maybe they just do it, you know, quote unquote, as charity work. they like programming as a hobby, and so in their free time they penetrate systems and expose the vulnerabilities back to the company.
To call it another content creator, Thor, like I know if you watch any of his stuff, Justin, I've sent you some of his videos.
Yes.
But like he's got like he used to be, or he is a security expert in that regard, like offensive security expert. So not so much white hat hacking, but like he's definitely familiar with the industry. But anyway, it's like I know that stuff has been going around in the industry
For a while.
For more than longer than 2015.
But it could be something that Salesforce might have been the first company to really put together like a full-fledged program for like, hey, anybody that participates in this, if you come here and you bring these deliverables, you're going to get a payout. But honestly, I feel like the banner headline here really is just like, that's got to feel good knowing that a vendor that you're trusting with a big part of your business, because let's be honest, like when isn't CRM one of the most important parts of your company? It's your black book. It's all your customers. So to know that on top of their internal information security teams, like the IT security teams at the data centers where this is hosted, Salesforce is additionally like forking over 20 million. And again, like this isn't like it's a salaried program. These are people that have actually found vulnerabilities that have been addressed and resolved. So that's $20 million of additional security that's been implemented. And to me, that just feels good to know that a company cares that much to put something this in place and invest that heavily in it.
Essentially, my perspective is that 18.9 million is not a lot of money over the course of 10 years.
Fair.
And for me, what that says is that they didn't find a lot of stuff. Like Salesforce is pretty secure over those 10 years, trying to find these bounties. And that's the thing. That's my takeaway from this is that, despite 9-10 years since they've launched this program, they've only had to hand out this amount of money. Because I think if you look at some of the other bounty programs that I've heard of, like or even if you look at Intel or AMD, some of those bounty programs they do for the hardware side, hardware security, it's quite a bit more money. But all this being said, just because Salesforce is like, hey, it's pretty secure, we haven't had any major security updates, like we haven't had any app exchange apps or other apps that have been taken down, modified significantly to avoid specific vulnerabilities. All that's being said is that the big problem with Salesforce is you. Is that it's so easily to be customized and developed on that you can easily build in vulnerabilities quickly. And we've seen that whether it's cross-site scripting way back in the day, which we haven't seen too much in the past, but SQL injection or SOCL injection,
getting away from iframes, getting away from well, and I would almost argue like browsers have been a big part of helping enforce better like customer implementations of Salesforce, because when Chrome's like, hey, cross-site scripting resources, we're just going to start blocking them across the board, it's not allowed anymore. All of a sudden everybody's like, oh, remember all those shortcuts we took that we weren't supposed to? I'm gonna make them go away.
But yeah, so it's like like we don't see that as much, but it's still like we've seen some hairy stuff. So just because Salesforce is taking care of the white hat hacking doesn't mean that you guys shouldn't explore the vulnerabilities specific to your Salesforce org. That could just be basic security, like you're looking at your role hierarchy.
Password on your front door. It's a bad idea.
I was going to say, like, looking at your user hierarchy, your role and sharing rules, who has the ability to create new roles, who has the ability to add and remove user permissions, like your whole Salesforce security setup infrastructure. Even though you might be safe from external threats, you still have to look at, hey, what happens if someone's PC gets hacked and they're logged in and they can actually have full user cred admissions to everything in your Salesforce org. So definitely, if you guys, just to plug us again, if you guys are concerned about that, we do offer free health checks, so something for you guys to take a look at. But again, this is cool for the most part. It's I personally, my takeaway, which is a little bit different from Justin's, is that there wasn't a lot of stuff that they found over the past decade for the most part.
And the quick by the numbers was, I think they said it's about 30,000 since the program's inception. Last year it was about 4,000. So you can kind of get a feel for, like, as time's gone on, I imagine that there have been like highs and lows on that reporting.
They said in 2023, like the highest was like 3 million over that year. So, and again, that might be just because it's like, again, like as new like tools come out in particular, which we're going to talk about in the next article, is AI suddenly became not a buzzword back in 2023, technically end of 2022, but really 2023. So here we are. But we'll put that one to bed.
I was going to say, let's keep running.
White hat hacking, cool stuff. So let's talk about AI. I know we haven't done that enough in the past 3, and I'm sure everyone's talked about AI. But yeah, so Salesforce has another article out here. And the title is 85% of IT leaders see AI boosting productivity. No duh. But as part of that, data integration and overwhelmed teams hinder success. Also, no duh. It's like, this is one of these article titles that I see that it's like 85%, and you just like, of course. Yeah. So this is super interesting because I feel people really underestimate, like, again, this kind of comes back to, I think, something we talked about 2 or 3 episodes ago. But when I was sitting there with Peter, we were at Dreamforce or World Tour, but Peter Coffey was doing his speech. And he had that presentation where he's like, look at the compute graph. Like, look how this has increased over the last decade. And it's a hockey stick going straight up. And he's like, look at data storage and generation, and it's a hockey stick. And he put the two together, and compute's like ear, and data growth, overall data growth, like how much data we've been, it's just off the chart. Like you can't, like, it's like the sun and the earth. Like if you put them in a scale thing, it's monumental.
We're hoarders, and we should be, but we're hoarders. We've got so much data.
But that's the thing. It's like your AI, your specific implementation of your large language model, or any GPT that you're leveraging, like it's only as good as the data you provide it, And so these, like whether you're using OpenAI, ChatGPT, or one of those open source ones or paid for from Google, Microsoft, and even Salesforce as they're coming out with Einstein, and they're trained based on their own unique data set, and then you're enhancing it, making it specific to you. People are like, well, wait, my data is garbage. How do I make this better? So everyone, like you've got every executive on the planet going like, we need to start using AI, and they still haven't solved the problem of their data, which has been the problem since the last decade. It's like, we need to integrate with all this stuff, and we need to consolidate, go to the cloud. It's like, okay, but your data is garbage. Like, oh, just shove it all up into the cloud. It's better. It's like moving your messy room from your room to the master bedroom to a storage closet back to a mansion, and stuff just gets scattered everywhere. Like it, and you're just not dealing with it. They keep pushing the problem off.
Well, data stewardship's never the sexy business responsibility. Like I never walk into a meeting with a client and I go, data stewardship, and they're like, now you have my attention. Well,
it's tough because the thing is like, this is a non-trivial problem. It's like, what data do you need to keep? What's important? Like when Justin brought up hoarding, it's like, do I want to delete some of the stuff? Do I have to delete some of the stuff? Do I have to get rid of it to be in compliance with CCPA, GDPR, right to be forgotten? Do I know even what I have?
Relating data across systems.
And how do I query all that information efficiently while continuing to run my business, like while running all my apps, while engaging with my customers and all this other stuff? And it's really not an easy problem to wrestle. And the issue that I feel like a lot of IT leaders or even just business leaders, the trap that they're falling into, that they think this is like a one and done problem, where they're going in and they're like, all right, we're going to move. I think in our last episode, we talked about vector databases, right? And why those are better for AI and blah. We're going to move all our stuff to vector database, and we're going to put a bunch of data there, and we're going to have a data warehouse, and problem solved.
Done.
But, like, this is an ongoing challenge forever. Like, this needs maintenance. You need to look at this stuff. You need the metrics. You need the BI tools to analyze it. Laws continue to change.
And scaling it.
Well, scaling happens. New technology comes into place, right? AI was a big disruptor, which is what we're suddenly talking about vector databases, right? Where people are like, this is like more efficient, but pain to use for most human readable apps. Like, I don't want to make the transition. It's not worth it. Now it's like, now it is worth it. Like, and then you get all these other benefits. And so like, this is something that IT leaders, business owners, like if they're taking this seriously and they're moving into this new age where they're getting a handle on their data and they really want to use AI to actually boost productivity, they need to take data integration, ingestion, and stewardship seriously. Like you're going to keep adding new systems. You're going, like, whether you set up a master data management solution, whether you're building a data lake, whatever you want to call it, right? An API mesh, blah blah. It doesn't matter. Like, whatever you're looking to do, I want to centralize my data. I want to have a hub and spoke model. I want to pass this out to all my customers. I want it to be seamless. That's great. You're going to buy new stuff next year, the year after. You're going to incorporate new AI models this year, the next year after. They're all going to need better and better quality data, more data, in order to perform and get the performance you want out of it and actually achieve this productivity change. And so people are just not, like, I think, not people, but I think just in general.
I've got some numbers for you here. So from that article,
go ahead,
these same IT leaders, 62% of them report that their data systems are not configured to fully leverage AI. So like, data models have not been set up. They don't have the ingestion in place. 81% say that they have data silos that are like one of their primary blockers to incorporating comprehensive AI into their IT stack. Furthermore, 95% of IT leaders report specifically that integration issues are what is causing problems with AI adoption at their organization. So I feel like it's worth to say it by the numbers, to your point, because if you're an IT leader and you happen to be listening to us ramble on our favorite broadcast here, and you're thinking, oh, that doesn't apply to me, like, maybe go back and think through your IT stack and some of the headaches you're facing internally and double check that, because this is a prevalent issue that's widespread. And, not to put on my mic hat and self-promote RadialSpark for a second, but I think this is one of the reasons why we've been so heavily hammering Heroku and MuleSoft alongside AI, is like, you need tools for staging data, for transforming data, for connecting all your different systems in a convenient way so you can actually ingest it into the right place to leverage with large scale data tools like Data Cloud, like Redshift, like name your warehouse, and then the IT AI that you're going to lay on top of it.
Yeah. And so I think when Peyton found this article for us to talk about, I thought this was really interesting, because when we're looking at generative AI, LLMs, when we're looking at basic machine learning, right? Like not even an LLM, just prediction engines, whether it's for preventative maintenance using IoT devices, whether it's for shipping predictions, whether whatever it is, that's tying in, like doing specific business functions and then passing that back to your customers and being predictive and being proactive with your customers, predicting their needs before they even have them. And for marketing, you see a lot of this stuff. Again, like these data silos and this just all kind of ties into some of the stuff we've been talking about with MuleSoft and Heroku. So if you're a Salesforce customer and you're in Salesforce, you're an IT leader in that organization, and you guys haven't evaluated or looked at Heroku yet, and again, we're the Heroku experts, so I'm always going to pitch it. But if you're not, like, if you have multiple systems and you haven't looked at this to help start tackling this problem, exposing your CRM data into a place where you can intermix it with your other systems, so then you can layer AI on top of it, you're not doing your job. Like, straight up, you're not doing your job. Like, I can't say it nicely. Like, if you're not looking at that, and it doesn't, again, like, the reality is it doesn't have to be Heroku. Like you mentioned, Redshift for archival, or Snowflake for data lakes or whatnot. But if you're not doing something with that, like, and Heroku is the reason why I bring up Heroku is because owned by Salesforce, one throat to choke. Salesforce Connect, Heroku Connect allows you to just ship your data into a place where you can then integrate it with everything else. It makes it super easy and fast. If you're not doing one of those things, you're straight up not doing your job, and you're not setting your company up for success in 2024. You're not going to be leveraging AI. It's like, straight up, I don't care what you say. Like, if you're not taking care of this problem, I don't care who you're paying, what, and how much money, like, you're not using AI. It's the stuff that we talked about in the last article, where we were like using AI as a predictive engine to help assist your customer service rep about finding shipping times, like integrated with your ERP to know like what's where, and then do all these queries and have the wherewithal to read this conversation, ship it to the LLM, the AI going like, oh, I know where this data is, I'm going to go get it, and then come back and be like, yo, here's where your product is, go tell the customer that, or just do that directly with the customer, right? That whole theory craft is completely impossible without you guys taking care of this data first. Like, you guys need to solve this data ingestion, data quality issue, like, today. Like, this should be the number one thing that organizations are dealing with in 2024. Because if you're not, you're going to be left in the dust with the AI train. Because anyone who is doing this is able to do stuff like that, like the thought experiment we brought up, and much more. Like, that's just the tip of the iceberg of what you're going to be able to do with some of the stuff.
And if I may, like, I think what it comes down to, this will be the one time that you don't actually have to pull it out of me, Mike. For any of you that listen along and aren't quite sure, you're like, I don't know how AI applies to my business, or like why I care about getting on the AI train. Like, the real thing, the truly disruptive part of AI, what it's going to be is how quickly it enables your employees to work and get things done. The quality of service differentiator is going to be the AI anticipating your employees' needs, surfacing things to them faster, surfacing things to your customer. And given just the availability of compute and the sheer scale of data, humans will never be able to process that as quickly in the absence of AI. So when everybody else implements it and you don't, you will fall behind. That's that's the differentiator. That's why you have to get on the train.
Well, and it's not even just fall behind. It's like you will be completely non-competitive, like overnight. Like people don't really understand yet. Like some do. We've worked with some customers, but a lot of people don't really understand like how, like even not where AI is going. Forget where AI is going. Just with what we have 6 months ago. Just with that, if we froze it today, people don't really understand or respect like what this could really do, because people like the level of the 85% productivity increase, like all great. The menial nonsense that you have your marketing department, your customer service department, like filling out reports, like filling out spreadsheets, updating presentations, doing little POCs for being creative, sending out invoices, like double checking invoices, having tailored emails that understand who their customer is and have that automated so they can stay on top and reach more people. All that's done today. Like you could do that today. The thing that's stopping you, this thing that's stopping the AI from like automating like all of that BS that people have to do in their cubicles, right? Is your data quality is garbage. That's what it is. Or your or you don't have access to it, or you don't have API setups where AI can easily ingest this data and be that auto assist, that intelligent natural language assistant that your employees can use and leverage in their day-to-day jobs. Like this is like we joke about what is it, Office Space, like TPS reports, like that, like I'm sure like people have like
Never
KPI
file a TPS report again, right?
but it's like
this for
but
me.
it's some of this stuff. It's like, hey, I need you to do a presentation to talk about you know, like what my team did last week so I could get it up to the boss and we could have the, like talk strategies, like, and that would take you a couple hours a week to do, or like you'd have to go chase it. Like if your data is fixed, you're like, hey, AI, build me a couple of slides for it'll do it in 20 seconds. That's what I'm saying. Like this is the stuff where you never have to do that.
Let's you know, for those of you who maybe aren't sold on the power of what AI can accomplish, all you really have to do is take a moment to look at the discussions that are happening in the popular community around the ethical use of AI. Because like if you look in the entertainment industries, whether that's like video gaming, film, or books, like there are serious concerns from content creators in those industries of like AI replacing their jobs. In video games, there's a whole thing about AI generated content and what is that doing and is that ethical. There's a whole thing in like authorship of like writing film or television content, like is that being AI generated? And there are serious social concerns, and a lot of the discourse there is underlining like, hey, what does this do to human jobs? I don't want to focus on that for a second, but what I want to say is the reason people are worried about what it could do to human jobs, that in of itself is an indicator of just how powerful AI is and how much it can do.
Well, I think that's the thing. It's like a lot of people, like, and I've been saying this behind closed doors, and I might as well say it now. A lot of people are out of jobs in 5 years. Like, there's a lot of jobs that are never going to be done again. Like the mid tier, like low tier lawyers, mid tier marketing managers, things like that, that are effectively pushing papers back and forth. You know, doing BDR work, like just basic outbound sell BDR work. Like that's all going to be AI. And ethical concerns aside, of like we're automating these people out of jobs, what are they going to do, blah blah blah, like that is an entire podcast in and of itself, episode that we could talk about. But the reality is that's the direction the industry is going. And if you're not taking care of it, like the only way you can, like, oh well, all these BDRs are going to get automated out of a job, it's like, yeah, no, they're not, because like, your data is all over the place. Your CRM data is here, your ERP data is over here. You have no idea where your leads are coming from. You have no idea, like you're not able to integrate all the touch points that customers have through your website, through your email marketing, whatnot. Like you haven't solved any of these problems. So your AI is going to be bad, just as bad, or more often worse than your normal BDR, because it just doesn't have the information to do it. So you're still going to need someone to sanity check it. And as people transition through this process, as these people that are worried about their jobs being replaced, like this is where they, like if you start solving this problem and you empower these individuals to work with the AI and sit over top of it, because you're going to need to, like even if you hire us to go in and set up a data lake and do all your, like someone needs to look at this data. It's like, okay, this makes sense. I sanity check it before you just let the AI start running wild with your stuff. Like, you're going to need to do that. And as that happens, you're giving these people new skill sets. You're making them that 85% more productive. And then instead of replacing and getting all these people out of jobs, you start enabling and elevating these people.
Paying people.
You level them up.
So I would actually really like for you and I to do a dedicated broadcast talking about some of the ethics of AI, because I really like the conversation you and I had internally, right? When I raised to you my concern about the notion that, like, how could you trust homework from a schooling perspective with the availability of AI, like somebody getting AI to write their essay, things like that. And then we had a conversation about, well, like, maybe writing the essay doesn't become the pertinent skill of the time anymore. It's like, do you know how to leverage all these AI assistants and all these tools at your disposal to accomplish higher level problems? And there's something there, and there's something to be talked about. So I think it would be cool to, like, have a discussion like where we talk through that.
Yeah, we'll set one aside, because it's really interesting, because the millennial generation in particular, like millennials, like, I think Justin, you're more on the tail end.
Yeah.
But
I remember a time when people, like, when not everybody had a cell phone. That started in high school for me.
Yeah, so I think it's more my part of that generation, because I think technically I'm millennial, but I'm like tail end of Gen X, beginning of Gen Y, right? Where, like, I remember having to write essays by hand, in 4th grade. And then, because not everyone had a computer, we had in 4th grade, I had a personal computer, but like we barely used it, because Dad used it for games, or not for games, for work. He got it issued for him to work. The computer lab, that whole thing, like that whole process where we went from 0 computers, doing things by hand, going to research, to AOL
at school,
to using 18 search engines, to having to dig through 65 pages of results, to having just go to Google, we experienced that whole transition. So I think it's going to be interesting discussion, because this is the last thing I'll say about it. We'll move on, because I think our generation really needs to take that experience and lead it into the future with everyone else, because we went from, like, we watched skills just get wiped off, like the relevancy map, overnight, and just adapted as it went along. Like, the new generations coming up who had iPads growing up, this is just how it was, like, for them, you know what I mean? And it's this is just how the world worked. And a lot of them haven't seen, like, that drastic change and paradigm shift. I think, not that they don't have other things to add, but I think we have a unique perspective, and so we should definitely discuss it, especially like different parts of the millennial generation. But anyway, we'll put that aside. Peyton, pin it for an episode topic. Maybe we'll write something brief up on it, and go from there.
To put together like a little, I don't know, I wouldn't call it a white paper, maybe an opinion piece.
Yeah, just an opinion, something fun. But let's move on. So we have an article that we wrote a couple of months ago, and we've been talking about this, reviewing some of these articles, and this one really ties in, because again, when you look at the previous article that we just talked about, this we're talking about better together, Heroku plus MuleSoft, why you should use it. And these two particular tools, and a lot of these use cases, are setting up data lakes, setting up data integration, setting up data validation, and data cleansing. Like, all this ties into this stuff. And I believe we talked about Active Prime last week, and their data generation and data cleansing, or data quality analysis, AI driven engine. And again, this is one of these things where it's like, that's all built on Heroku. It's a Heroku add-on, and if you centralize your data, you can start tackling this problem, so you can use AI. So we're going to talk about this article is pretty technical for, I wouldn't say pretty technical for a technical audience, but pretty technical for a business user audience. So I'm going to try to break it down at a high level, and then we're going to elaborate on it. We're not going to review and read the entire article to you guys. It'll be linked here and linked in the chat. Peyton will post it for you guys. Definitely take a look. It's very useful if you guys have been evaluating and trying to figure out, like, if you're in the Salesforce ecosystem, try to figure out, hey, how do I incorporate AI? This is going to be like, hey, start looking at these types of tools to help solve the underlying issues, so that you can really leverage your AI. So let's dive into it. Better together, Heroku plus MuleSoft. So Justin's actually working on another article that is elaborating on this, but from the opposite perspective, where
almost
Mule's
planned this.
Yeah, Where MuleSoft is enhancing Heroku's capabilities, this article is talking about Heroku enhances MuleSoft capabilities. Why you should use both from that perspective. There are reasons on both sides, but we're going to focus on this because that's the point of this article. So in the beginning part, we've got the overview. We talk about what MuleSoft is, why you guys can take a look at it. Goes through the process, system, and experience APIs, how they interrelate with each other, and why it's a cool tool and why you should use it when you're doing enterprise level API development. We are big fans of it. It is a fantastic API tool, and as this whole AI data generation or AI data consolidation, data management process continues, everyone needs to be an API first organization, and tools like this allow you to be flexible and adaptable in this environment. And like, again, if you're just hand coding all of your APIs, like I don't know what to tell you, but it's 2020 was a while ago. Like 2010 was a long while ago. You guys need to get with the times. Yeah, there's a better way to live.
Take my hint, it's dangerous to go alone.
Yeah. So the first piece. So Heroku has a whole bunch of toolkits built into its platform. A lot of them are data storage toolkits, and one of which is Heroku Redis. I'm not going to bore you guys. We explain what it is here, but it effectively, the very short version is a key value data store. You use this for temporary caching of data, and that doesn't mean like it's small. Like you can cache large amounts of data, but pretty much you're like, I need to park my data here. I don't need to really store it in the long term, but I need to park it before I pass it on, do something with it, whatnot. So it's particularly useful in application development for using temporary or ephemeral memory store in order to manipulate, do final data, or do inter-process data manipulations prior to committing it to a particular system or downstream where someone's going to look at it. You're like, I need to do some manipulations here, and I'm waiting on other systems to come in. So MuleSoft, this is perfect for MuleSoft because MuleSoft is like, think of it as all these little tentacles stretching out to your entire ecosystem. It's grabbing on all these different data points, and it's like, hey, I want to, I like this system responded. I want to park this data because I need to combine it with this system over here. Where do I put this while I'm waiting for this to come back and whatnot? Heroku Redis helps enhance that experience. Now, MuleSoft does have some capabilities in doing some caching and data storage.
Thread the needle there for you.
Yeah, I'll tag you in. But it's like, but I'm gonna, like, Justin explains how this is set up. So if you look at the document, you can see we can attach Redis at every level of the API chain that MuleSoft has. But Justin, I explain what it is. The articles here, they could go into detail, but why? Like, why would I use this? Because people are going to say, well, MuleSoft, they could cache some data. Like, why would I use this?
So I guess let me start with, we'll call it a couple quick admissions for people that are in the know on the products. MuleSoft does have its own memory store for its APIs. I believe it's called Object Store off the top of my head, but these are memory stores for each individual API. And so if you're looking at this diagram with the experience API, these process APIs, system APIs, and attached Redises, there's a couple crazy concepts that become possible when you think about this creatively. So what MuleSoft gives you out of the box with these APIs and their independent memory stores, this lets you solve use cases like, I have frequently requested resources through an API. Everybody asks me for this thing, so I'm storing it in memory so I don't have to go all the way to the database to get it. I know it's wanted, I've got it there. If you have asynchronous jobs that you're running, because, and I'm going to try not to dive too deep into 3-layer architecture here. Experience APIs are going to be the APIs that your customers or partners would hit, driving their experience with you. Process APIs are your aggregators. They connect to all your different backend systems to make sure the right stuff gets pulled from the right place and gets sent back to the right place. The system APIs are just providing access to that specific singular backend system. So one experience API can call multiple process APIs. One process API can call multiple systems. You can see how it fans out. Every one of those APIs has a memory store, and it can cache the most frequently requested things. You can, on your experience layer, say, hey, I have a long running job. I've got this set aside until it's ready. And then when they come back to poll, if it's complete, I can report on its status based on that job ID that I've held on to. Where Redis gets uniquely valuable, something that MuleSoft doesn't do and that I think is cool, is in the diagram we've showed Redis attached at every layer. And what I'm realizing in hindsight, I could have diagrammed a little better here, is it can be the same Redis.
Yeah,
so you can share memory caches horizontally and vertically in this diagram. So both process APIs could connect to the same Redis, which means depending on the type of information being transferred, you can get optimizations of data access for interplay between those two because the response is cached in a common location. Same thing for system APIs, same thing for experience. But then if you want to talk like very frequently requested resources and you want to short circuit your entire API chain, because experience calls process calls system, you could vertically connect your memory stores across several key systems so that frequently requested resources at the system level can be cached in Redis and immediately available at the experience level. So this is saving intermediary API calls, travel time, and like basically fast forwarding your data right to your customer. So the universal. Go ahead.
Or to your large language model.
Or to your large language model. Thank you for bringing AI in. I do get tunnel vision when it comes to technology. So what's cool is you get universal transparency by sharing your memory stores horizontal across related but same level APIs. And you get like huge performance improvements by like fast forwarding data up to the experience layer by vertically sharing your memory. And this is not something that MuleSoft's in-house memory stores are designed to do. They really are for the more traditional thinking about an API in the vacuum use case. Now, Redis can augment those use cases by provisioning additional memory storage, particular configurations that you may need for your infrastructure. Like when we talk GDPR, things like that, where is this actually going to be held stored? If you need specifically regionally located memory stores, Heroku and Redis give you the ability to do that, augmenting MuleSoft for those most basic use cases. But I think the most compelling thing is actually being able to share memory stores across APIs. And that's crazy.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing, is being able to share a single memory store across a complex API network, which is what everyone is finding themselves with, like with all these different tools and systems and apps that you buy and or build, like combining that and being able to have that capability where you're able to centralize temporarily some key data to then pass to your customer, your AI or downstream system, it's just going to be critical. And the thing is that MuleSoft out of the box does a great job of this, but the sharing across this complicated network is just not something that like you can straight up plan for. And it's already like, again, it's super simple to tie in with Heroku. And I think that's the key thing to take away, is that this is why these two tools play so well together, is because you don't have to, like, the problem is already pretty much solved for you. Like the provisioning of Redis it's a
point-and-click thing, which that's what I wanted to call out. Is anybody listening along, you'll notice we haven't talked anything about implementation, because we're not talking about building anything on Heroku. We're just talking about provisioning Redis and then letting your MuleSoft use it. So that's crazy what you can accomplish with that.
And again, it's like if this is part of a more complicated app and you've built an API on top of it that like MuleSoft is consuming, like, okay, there's some work there, but MuleSoft also could be your system API and can consume Redis. So really, you just need to provide, like, this whole thing we showed you here, in theory, depending on your particular use case, is entirely point and click. Or it could be custom depending on what you need, but it potentially is entirely point and click. And this is the thing, people look at a Heroku and they're like, oh my God, I'm gonna need developer. Like, I don't understand. They keep saying words like I don't know what it means. Like, this is just provisionable caching.
The system admin could do this.
Yeah, exactly. So now that we talked about Redis a little bit, why it's important, why you guys should care. Before I move on really quick, Justin did just touch on this briefly, but the security thing where it's like, hey, we want to share all of our API data across all of our systems. If you're a regional player, like, that's fantastic. You don't have to worry about anything. But if you're a global player and you're worried about data residency, you can actually handle that with Redis. So you can, like, set up this infrastructure where you're like, I'm sharing all of my APIs across my entire network, but you also have deployments in different countries or different regions that are important to you that you can't share data with, you could also provision in a point and click fashion Redis in specific regions to be compliant. And again, that's all
Co-located
admin.
Heroku and MuleSoft private spaces with that infrastructure provision side by side, and then you VPC peer it because they're both ultimately AWS VPCs, which means you get secure non-public internet communication between your Redis and those globally distributed APIs. It's nuts. Anybody who got excited by that, contact us. It is as cool as it sounds.
No, it is cool because like you could literally take this app in one region and then just replicate it on Heroku. Like it's already set up and just be like MuleSoft over here, point here, and then deploy in this location and you're done. So once you prove out the concept in one region, you want to roll it out globally. It's, again, always depends on your use case. There's always caveats, but to use the marketing speak, it's as easy as point and click, right? So let's move on. The next section here, we're talking about MuleSoft and Heroku Postgres. And for you guys who pay attention to us, like we talked about Heroku Postgres all the time. It's our favorite database, blah, 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 because it has Salesforce and Heroku Connect. Like that's what it uses. we use this all the time. This is the way, this is the portal in which your data is able to be exposed permanently into your wider ecosystem of products that you have in your IT stack. So Justin, we talk about MuleSoft, we talk about Postgres here. We kind of go into detail, SQL databases, whatnot. The diagram is a little bit more complicated. You got a couple of Postgres databases or a couple of schemas that you're
here under the system
here.
APIs. Yep.
Under the system API. Why is this important? Why is like now we've got the data temporarily stored, so that we could consolidate it to pass it around. What do we use Postgres for?
I got to be honest. I come back to these articles I've written and I'm like, oh, I could have organized this conceptually way better. We should have started with Postgres because the compelling point for Postgres is much simpler than Redis. At the end of the day, MuleSoft is an API mesh solution. I like to jokingly call it an API pass. And so everybody thinks of it for integration, connecting your existing systems. What is the one thing that MuleSoft misses out of the box for you to actually generate your own product? And that's data persistence. And I can't even tell you how many times I have conversations with people internal to Salesforce. And I'm like, hey, have you considered adding Heroku databases to this MuleSoft implementation so that you can just permanently store that data and then make your MuleSoft API like the data API for this data model? And somebody's like, wait, so like we could make a backend API product, like API first, API only, maybe, because at the end of the day, that's all a system API is, an API only backend product. That's not like, hey, I'm integrating somebody else's system or something that was already built. Like we could actually build our own data model, provision it to a database, stand the database up, and wrap it in an API with MuleSoft. And I've created a standalone product. And I've blown some minds at MuleSoft with that concept. So at the end of the day, what this means is that you can build product with MuleSoft, not just integrate IT systems. Because once you have persistent data, it's like, what do you want to make? A to-do list? You design a to-do list data model in your database. You provision the database. Your system API makes that to-do list accessible. It's now usable in any experience you want. And so I'm not even sure where else to take it from that. Like, congratulations.
Yeah, well,
MuleSoft APIs can permanently store data now. That's the idea.
And I think, again, this kind of comes back to what we were talking about previously when we talked about AI. You guys got to start handling your data. This is the starting point. So if you're, the next section, we're going to talk about Heroku Connect. And I think this will just tie in to this point. So we'll just move down to the Heroku Connect side. So it's like when you're looking at handling this problem that 85% of IT leaders are trying to take care of with integrating with AI, but they found out their data is all over the place and siloed. This is the thing. MuleSoft stitches all your systems together through APIs. You can use Redis to temporarily share data across all of your different systems, leveraging MuleSoft APIs to then do some really cool stuff, whether it's data manipulation, whether it's passing it off to an AI, some other LLM in another system, blah, blah, blah. But you're like, all right, that's great. I could temporarily do this, but now I want to start storing, reporting, massaging, actually fixing my data, like fixing my inputs or making sure it's not garbage in, garbage out. And the first step of that is Heroku Postgres. And it doesn't just need to be Heroku Postgres. We've leveraged this one here because we're coming up with the vector database one, but Heroku also supports vector databases. They support graph databases that you could do too, and you can also tie that into your Postgres and it tie into your MuleSoft. So it's like, I want to start consolidating and centralizing my actual day-to-day data into one spot, and I want that to be Heroku, so that I could start leveraging AI down the road or doing this other stuff. And so this is why Postgres makes a lot of sense. And if you're a Salesforce customer, Heroku Postgres makes sense because your Salesforce connects to AWS, connects to all of your other systems through Heroku Connect and Salesforce Connect. And that dumps data into Heroku Postgres. And that's another API, like seamless point and click configure API to take your CRM data, ship it over to Heroku, so that you can expose it to this wider world of APIs, whether those be experience for customer apps, whether that's system APIs for backend processing, shipping, ERP connections, whether it's just process APIs to tie into, logical rules engines that are API gated, that are talking to multiple different systems, up to and including different types of AIs, maybe multiple AIs, maybe IoT device. Like, again, this is what all this is for. And you're able to cache that data and store it and really build an extremely complex application stack that normally would take like years to set up, to be honest, like with any level of this sophistication 10 years ago, and do it in the matter of months. Like, this is why
Crazy.
you guys should be looking like this. And sometimes, depending on like how many systems you're talking about and what you're trying to bite off, like you could set up this level of infrastructure, this level of sophistication, and bite off a little piece as a proof of concept in a matter of weeks, just to prove out that it's like I could get one system A, system B, this whole process talking to each other, and Salesforce talking to that, and trying it out and be like, oh wow, we got this set up in like 4 or 6 weeks. Like, let's get the rest of our 20 systems, put in place. Let's talk about retiring some of those. Let's centralize some of this data so we don't need to have all this stuff scattered everywhere and siloed, right?
Well,
so this is
I was going to say, when we bring Heroku Connect into play, I've got what I think is a pretty compelling vision of what's possible here. So we've talked about Heroku Connect a lot. The single point I'd like everybody to keep in mind as I say this next piece is like, Heroku Connect is the only product in Salesforce's catalog or in their ecosystem that allows you to access data from Salesforce, either put data in or pull data out without worrying about consuming those inbound API limits if you're using a push strategy with your data. Because if you hit Salesforce's API, that's going against your inbound API limits, rolling 24-hour limit there, scaled based on your users. So under heavy loads or high traffic, that's not an ideal mechanism. So Heroku Postgres is the database to use with Heroku Connect. When you think of those two together and you think of that advantage specifically, something that's uniquely cool and appealing about MuleSoft, Heroku, and Salesforce together is on your Salesforce, you can have data that you want to share with customers. You can have an experience cloud that has your ACM, your MuleSoft ACM deployed. And that's the marketplace where people can request access to APIs and like be authenticated and given credentials to be able to use them. Those APIs being the experience, process, and system APIs you're seeing in the diagram. So that experience cloud is what lets them hit those APIs, which ultimately just trickle down to the Heroku Postgres database that has the data you synced from your Salesforce to serve it up without hitting your Salesforce API. So you're getting that scalability without worrying about your inbound API limit. You're getting the benefits of MuleSoft APIs and control through ACM. You're able to distribute those connections and tie in other systems with that data through the experience and process layers. But like in my mind, that's just such a beautiful package of like one Salesforce org, one Heroku instance, Heroku connecting data, completely offloading your integration burden to Heroku. And that's another thing we could have talked about in the last section that we didn't, is that idea of just because you have data in a source system doesn't mean you want to abuse that source system with requests to get that data. So having Heroku Postgres available gives you a staging place where you're like, hey, this data gets requested a lot and it's going to get hit by, 30,000 subscribers regularly. I don't want to take my Salesforce down. So this is a separate infrastructure that can take that hammering and not slow down your internal operations. So you factor that consideration in, you factor the advantages of Heroku Connect in, and then you still use everything that MuleSoft gives you out of the box. Like, to me, that is so compelling. Just so
well, and the final section here, which you're actually like really light on technical details, which is nice because the technology is complicated. We talk about Apache Kafka and pub sub models. When you talk about having a mirrored or staging database where you've got tier one key internal business systems that have data that are the primary source of that data that you need access to downstream, whether it's distributors, vendors, or customers, that are going to access it way more frequently, but need like high availability without bringing down your tier one system, whether that be your CRM, your ERP, or whatnot. Being able to stage that on Heroku, which could scale, which could scale rapidly at the click of a button, is key. And so when you're looking at Apache Kafka, which again, I know this is for a lot of people who are tuning out right now because I just said a bunch of random words.
We're talking about spaceships, Mike. This is space.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about spaceships. We're talking about the Apache attack helicopter, right? That's what we're talking about. Like, Boeing makes some cool stuff. No, so effectively, if you've and I'm sure a lot of people have heard of pub sub models. That's pretty common in the industry. But when you're looking for real time or effectively real time data integrations for small pieces of data flowing in and out of your system, this is what you would like. This is
pub Heroku's the way you go.
Yeah, this pub sub's the way you go. And Heroku's preferred solution to that is Apache Kafka, which is one of it's
a leading solution as well. Like, I would say
it's a leading open source solution. You know, anyone who doesn't have like a proprietary system is using likely this. And again, Heroku, why you would use it, point and click for setup. It's really straightforward.
Very easy to provision and set up.
But Justin, when we talk about this, and we talk about, like, instead of me asking you why you would use this, because I think we've already discussed that, like talking about why Redis is important, talking about the staging database, and Heroku Postgres, and having the scalable infrastructure that doesn't potentially take down your tier one solutions. And aside from the fact that for a scalable pub sub solution, Heroku is, out of all of Salesforce products, is the only one that does this. Like, yes, Salesforce is a streaming API, but it is not on this level. This is enterprise grade.
And it is not a messaging bus. It is a streaming API, and there is a difference.
Right. So this is pretty much the only place you could do this. Where do you see plugging this in? Like, what's a realistic use case? Like, now we've got the whole thing. We got Salesforce, Salesforce Connect, Heroku Connect, Postgres, Redis. Now we got Kafka. Walk me through.
Let's talk about the vanilla flavor to begin with, and keep it very simple. If you've already got IT infrastructure that's set up and connected on a pub sub model, and you want to bring that in to like what you're connecting at an API level with MuleSoft, there's some doing in that, because for the uninitiated, what a pub sub model is you effectively have a place where you send messages, typically called the topic. Publishers push messages into that topic. Subscribers read them and track which messages they have and have not already seen. And this is how you can go one to many. This is how you go near real time, is basically the sending and the receiving of the message are decoupled and buffered by this topic. There's some things that go with that, though. When you talk about an API trying to interact with a topic, topics don't make call outs. They're not live processing. They're basically passive data storage, very similar to a Redis. So a MuleSoft API could very easily make a call to publish a message into a Kafka topic, but there's not necessarily an easy way to say, hey, when something comes into this Kafka topic, I want to make a push to a MuleSoft API and call that out. So if that's what we're dealing with, Heroku, one, being the only place that you can easily provision Kafka inside of the Salesforce ecosystem, Heroku gives you that ability to build a lightweight subscriber, like a one dyno subscriber listening to a topic. When a message comes in, make that API call to MuleSoft and say, hey, this API, I wanted to let you know a message came in. So what you start doing is you start stitching your API integration mesh across all your IT and your pub sub integration mesh together. And if we're talking about true customer 360, access to all your data, feeding this to AI, if you have a rather comprehensive API mesh and a rather comprehensive pub sub mesh, and both of those things are two separate IT islands, you still have a data integration problem. So using Heroku to build those subscribers to then transition to API messaging, or having MuleSoft push messages into Kafka topics lets you bridge those gaps and start bringing those islands together as well, which I think is really powerful and really important. That's in a nutshell, and I'm trying to stay on task here because I know I've already taken us a few minutes over.
No worries. I had to hot swap my battery anyway because my headset just decided to die. Like,
Oh, no worries.
But yeah, so I think again, like the takeaway here, just to wrap this up, because we've been talking about this for a bit, is that when you're looking at MuleSoft and you're looking at how do I go into 2024 and solve for AI, you have to solve for data. And the way you solve for data is you start getting controls over it and getting handles on that. And how do you do that? You start consolidating your APIs so that you can control where data goes into, how it comes out. And the way you do that is through MuleSoft. And then the way you really enhance its capabilities is through Heroku.
Yeah. If I could, I think it's kind of like a 3-step process. If you want to think about, I need to get a handle on my data to roll out AI. Step 1 is achieve accessibility to all your data, regardless of what system it's in. That's going to come from pub sub implementations or from MuleSoft API integrations that give you consolidated access to data from any system, the ability to consume it from any API, and start tying it together in a logical business sense. Once you achieve data accessibility, the second problem to solve for is data quality, like making sure it's uniform, that all your systems agree, and that you are going to be putting good fuel into your AI engine. This is where Heroku comes in, because you can do more elaborate transformations. You can stage that cleansed data in a singular place to then be ingested by AI. And then once you get to that final place of like, all right, let's actually roll out AI, you're talking about picking your data lake, whether that's, you know, something like a data cloud or an alternative, and then rolling out AI on top of that data access. So if you're thinking about it in that like high level 3 plan, get access, get quality, then deploy, that's how I think these tools tie together. MuleSoft gives you access, Heroku gives you the horsepower to clean that data up, and then their connectivity with so many other tools in the ecosystem makes it easy to put wherever AI's final home is going to be in your IT stack.
Well, and then the final piece too, just to talk about it, is that Heroku is also the place to build. Like if you're building new things, new apps, like that's where you do it. So once you get your all of your data centralized and consolidated here, now you've got the infrastructure to build on top.
Well, and you know, you crack.
Just I gotta cut you off. Like I gotta cut you off. So
give me 2 minutes. Shameless.
You don't have it. We actually don't have it. Okay.
So what I was going to say is that's what our next article is going to be. Experience APIs developed through traditional front-end frameworks, system APIs developed through traditional back-end frameworks, and MuleSoft at the process API layer, and how you can have a traditional development flow on Heroku that still has a lot of these advantages tying in MuleSoft. So that's going to be what's next on docket.
As everyone can see, you can't control this man, and like he can never stop talking. It's just impossible. So
you have so many great ideas.
Great ideas, he says. Hey guys, to wrap this one up, again, this is our first episode of the 2024. We're gonna have more episodes like this, similar format. If you guys have questions or topics you want to talk about, or anything more specific we want to go into, please reach out to us and engage at RadialSpark.com. Hit us up in the comments, LinkedIn, whatnot. Peyton will be more than happy to get that directed to the right people. If you guys are looking for consults, okay, we've said a lot of stuff. This sounds compelling, but how the heck does this actually work? More than happy to do a health check for you guys for free, just a sanity check, and help guide you along this direction. Because frankly, 2024 is going to be the year of AI, and 2024 by extension is going to be the year of like fixing your data. Like if you guys aren't doing this, like I said earlier,
You will be.
You're not doing well, you will be, or you'll be out of job because you're not doing your job. Like anyone who's looking at this and is not thinking about this type of stuff in 2024, like you absolutely have to. Like you can't kick this can down the road any further. Like this is it. So with that said, we've got another episode coming up on Wednesday. We're going to be highlighting one of our partners again, Soligo, talking about some specific things there. So stay tuned to that on the channel. That'll be a fun episode for those of you who have NetSuite and Salesforce and are interested in how those two play together. We have a partner that does that, and we've got some stories to tell around that with Justin and George Heckert, who've been on a previous episode. So this will be the second one in that series. And then we're going to start trying to get back into a regular cadence about bi-weekly, at least 2 episodes a month. Again, it's end of Salesforce's fiscal, for those of you who don't know. So if you haven't made a Salesforce deal, now's the time to do it. You got 2 days left. Call your AE.
Call your AE now.
Call your AE now. Get some business closed. But the reality is, January is always a little crazy. February is a little bit more relaxed. We also have some trips coming up too. So if you guys are looking to meet us up in person, we'll probably be in Chicago in February. I'll figure out the dates and we'll talk about that in our next episode. And then Vegas in early March. So guys, thanks so much for tuning in. And for those of you guys who found it helpful and have some questions, please reach out. And with that, we'll call it quits.
Happy 2024, everybody.